Greetings everyone, I'm Kevin, and today I'm doing the Talking Titles book tag. So this little tag called Talkin' Titles is an original tag by Slanted Spines. So I will have their link down below to the original video. I'm sorry about the background noise. I have two cats and they're currently playing. This is just as the tag name suggests. It's a tag about titles, book titles in particular, because this is a book tag after all. So the first question, is we often say don't judge a book by its cover, but do you judge a book by its title? And does a book's title influence whether or not you pick up the book? And I'm gonna be honest here. I do judge books by the cover. I am a lot more inclined to buy books if the cover is nice. I don't really care about the title. Like, the title can be whatever. Like, I would probably, if I would go to like a thrift store and see a book that is absolutely gorgeous and it's in Arabic, I would buy it. Like, I don't care if I can read it. Like, if it looks beautiful, I will probably buy it. So like, I really don't care about the title. Like, it's not something that affects me or the way that I pick out books in any way, shape, or form. Unless it's something that is kind of like intriguing. But most of the time, no. The second question is, when you read a book, do you try to figure out why the book got its title, if the title isn't an obvious one? And does it bother you when you can't figure it out? I do try to figure it out. Like, I tend to really like think, okay, this book is called this, but why? Like, I can be stuck on that for hours, just figuring out like, this book has this name, but why? You know, like, I can do that a lot. And yes, it does bother me when I can't figure it out, because mostly if it doesn't have a logical reason for the title being what it is, I don't see like, why did you call this book as it is? Like, why not give it another title that actually makes sense? So that is something that bothers me. I'm a very, like, I would say, analytical and rational person. I am. If you're a Star Trek geek like me, I consider myself on the Vulcan side of a spectrum, because I'm very logical and I always try to figure out like, okay, this happened, so that must mean, like, I always try to think like logically and rationally about a lot of things, figuring out the reason behind it and stuff like that. So when I can't do that, it frustrates me. The third question is, do you typically remember book titles, or are you always going, that one book? I tend to remember. I have a good memory in that sense, like with names and like dates and stuff, numbers and stuff like that. I have a good memory of. So I usually remember the book, the title of the book, or the color of the cover. Like, either it's, oh, that one blue book with like the flowers and stuff, or it's like, oh, it's that book title. It depends if I read it and if I enjoyed it. But I tend to remember book titles, or, as I said, the cover's color. Question number 4. Do you think that series titles should coordinate? What's the best series title that comes to mind? I do think there should be a red thread in a series that you can very easily say, oh, this must be like the next book in the series, and not like the first book has this one title and then the next is like completely out of there, like completely different. That would bother me. So I would prefer to see like a very clear, but because otherwise it has happened to me actually that I have bought a book that is the second or the last book in a series because I didn't realize that it was part of a series because of the name. And then following up like on this question is, what's the best series titles that come to mind? My favorite series when it comes to like the titles, but also like I love this series too, is To All the Boys I Loved Before. The whole series has to do with like these love letters that Lara Jean writes whenever she has a crush, and she kind of like she needs to put her feelings and thoughts to paper to kind of like write it off. She writes love letters to the guys she has crushes on, and she never intends to send them. And so with that in mind, we have To All the Boys I Loved Before, which is the start of a letter to all the boys I've loved before. And then, like after you have the letter, you sign it, Always and Forever, Lara Jean. And after you sign a letter, you write, P.S. I love you. That's why I absolutely adore these titles of this specific series, because it all has to do with love letters. And that is, like, in my opinion, that like having a trilogy where the title of each book is directly a reference to specific things in a letter. Like the only set things of letters is the addressing to the person you're writing the letter for or sending the letter to. In this case, To All the Boys I've Loved Before. And then like you have all the like the text or the pictures or whatever. And then after you write the whole letter, you always sign it with your name and something like kind regards, Kevin, or something. And in this case, it was Always and Forever, Lara Jean. And then the last thing that you do sometimes is the PS. And I love that. I think that was so well done, and it's something that I'm kind of obsessed with. And I think that just like a fun thing to kind of like a nice detail adding to the story. I think it fits the series very well, but I also think it's such a cute reference to something that is essential, especially in the first book. So I really love this series and the titles of it. Then question number 5 is, what are your favorite titles? And so I have a few examples. And the first one is The Last Human. And the reason this is like a favorite title of mine is because the first time I saw it, like, oh my god, what? The Last Human? Like, it really grabbed my attention, and I'm really excited to read it. So, like, that is why I consider, like, The Last Human to be a good title, because it really grabbed my attention. Was like, wait, Another title that I think is a good one is We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson. The reason I think this is like a good title is because it also makes you think, like, we are the ants, and then it has like this space, like it's very clear that it's space or like a sci-fi. So I just really enjoy that whole like we are the ants, because it's also something that's like what? Also like attention grabbing in that sense. Another one that I have, and I'm saying like there is a clear pattern here. The next one is When My Name Was Kyoko. And this is also like grabbed my attention, like When My Name Was Kyoko, like when isn't your name, Like when my name was Kyoko. So when is kind of like your name, like unless you're a trans person, you don't really change your name usually. So When My Name Was Kyoko was like stood out to me in that sense. Like I was like, what do you mean when your name was Kyoko? Like that just intrigued me. And this is a story of what it was like for Koreans living in Japanese occupied Korea when they were forced by the government to change names to Japanese names. Or it was something like, you are honored to change your name to Japanese names, which was just a nice way of saying you have to. If you don't, you will face consequences. So Sun-hee, who is the protagonist, had to rename herself, and the name became Kyoko. And that's kind of like this. Then we're on to question number 6, and it is like, what's the most iconic title that comes to mind? And I have a few that I think of like immediately. The first one is Twilight. Like that is a very, iconic series in the sense like Twilight, New Moon, Eclipse, Breaking Dawn. Like that has to do with cosmos in that sense. So those are very like iconic, and I think if anyone would give out a book called Twilight, everyone would think about Stephanie Meyer's Twilight. So it's iconic in that sense too. And then I also think, like, of course, A Court of Thorns and Roses, that series, because like all the books begin with a court of. So that is also like you read a title and you're like, oh, it's that series, you know? And then another one that comes to mind is the Shatter Me series, that everything is a word and me. So it's shatter me, defy me, unravel me, imagine me, ignite me, and you know, like all of that. So I think also if someone would give out a book called Try Me, for example, people would think of Shatter Me, the Shatter Me series, because it's a word and then me, that it would be like, oh, shatter me. Even though the book isn't by Tahereh Mafi, they would kind of like, at least I know I would directly like see that and be like, oh, shatter me. And then, oh no, it's not Tahereh Mafi, so it's not, you know? Question number 7 is, what's the most uninspired, generic, lame title that comes to mind? And I have to say, I think A Court of Thorns and Roses, definitely. Like, I think it's come to a point where it's kind of not generic, but that format, the D or A or N, X of X and X, like that kind of format is done so much that it's become generic, in my opinion, that it's kind of like you see that kind of everywhere. A Court of Thorns and Roses, A Song of Wrath and Ruin, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, you know, like all of that it's like just come to a point where it's generic. Like, I think that format has become generic. Like in the beginning it was kind of like fun and, you know, fresh, but now it's come to the point where I'm kind of tired of it. Yeah, that is just like something with that I think is generic. Like, it's not specific titles, it's just that the title format has become generic because it's so overdone, in my opinion. Then we're on to the last question, which is question 8. Hypothetically, if you were to rename your channel using an already existent book title, what title would you choose for your channel? Fun fact, it already is. Like, it's not down to a T, but Much Ado About Books is directly a reference to William Shakespeare's play Much Ado About Nothing. But if I would change my title of my booktube channel, which is Much Ado About Books, to be the title of a book, I like the book. There are 2 books in particular, one that is fiction and one that is nonfiction. Both books are by Matt Haig. I consider Matt Haig to be one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. One of the titles that I would be like, yeah, this I would definitely use this, and it is How to Stop Time, because like that's what reading is like for me, at least, that it's a way to kind of like stop time. Everything like stops moving and you're just so, it's kind of like with the Never-Ending Story, you know, when Bastian just opens and then no time moves. And like Narnia is the same. Like they go into the wardrobe, and then when they go out of the wardrobe, no time has changed in our world. And that's kind of like how I feel when I'm reading, that it's not really, it feels like time slows down around me and I am so focused on the book that it's kind of like How to Stop Time read, kind of. And the other title that I think would work, at least for me, is Matt Haig's other book called Reasons to Stay Alive Books. Like those 2 were just like really spot on for me. Like reading and books are so important for me that, of course, like there are more reasons to stay alive than just reading books. But I think there are a lot of things with books that are life-saving. But I think How to Stop Time would be a great booktube if people understood the reference, even though it's not like a bookish title, because from what I know, like a lot of booktubers use a title or a username with something relating to books. Like I use Much Ado About Books. That was it for this tag, and if you watched this and you feel like, oh, I want to do this tag too, I'm tagging you, so you can just go ahead and do it, and like at me, tag me on Twitter if you do it. I would love to watch. And again, like, thanks Britt for creating this tag. It was super fun. I've never really thought about book titles this much before, so that was really interesting to kind of question myself, like, what do I think about titles? Like, they're always there, and like they're the thing that you use when you talk about books with people, but like I've never thought more about it, so that was kind of like fun to do. But that was it for this video, and I hope all of you enjoyed, and please leave a like if you did, and comment down below what your thoughts are on titles. Do you agree with me on like the generic of the X of X and X format, or anything else? What are your favorite book titles? Until next time, good reading. Bye.